Hey guys, Poro here with another video, this time for my last player rankings video. This will be the supports for Worlds 2025 tier list. We'll just quickly go over the ground rules for anybody who hasn't watched the other four. So you can see there are 3 tabs up here. That's because there's going to be 3 different tier lists. This first tier list is going to be my general tier list. This is the important one. This is the one that matters. The second tier list is a ceiling tier list. So it's if these players are playing at what I think is their realistic tournament best, how good do I think they'll be? And then the third tier list is the floor tier list. So if they play what I think would be realistically their worst showing, how bad do I think they'll be? And then I'll use the floor and the ceiling, plus some other factors that I'll talk about to determine where I would put them on my actual tier list. In terms of what my requirements are, so for me, the most important thing that I like to consider is how they played in split 3 playoffs. I think that split 3 playoffs can tell you a lot, because it shows you what their most recent form is. So their improvement over the course of the year, it shows you what the results of their improvement are in a high stakes environment. So I think that it is the most important thing you can look at for something like a world's ranking or a world's overview. Then after that, slightly less important, but what I consider to be the next most important is how they looked in split 3 regular season. So again, tail end of the year, so it shows what their most recent form will look like, but just in a slightly lower stakes environment. Then after that, I like to consider this, but not as heavily as most recent performances. I like to consider how they looked at past internationals if they've been to any. So how they looked if they went to MSI 25 or if they went to previous world championships. I like to look at how they did there, because sometimes people go international and they are international risers. They play much better on the big stage. Sometimes they're chokers. They play way worse in big moments. So that's something I consider. Then, less important than that, but still important, still something that I consider pretty heavily, is how they looked for the rest of the year. So split 1, split 2. If they were playing really well for a good chunk of the year and then maybe fell off right at the end, I still want to honor the fact that they were really elite for a long period of time. I think that only looking at split 3 and split 3 playoffs is too small of a sample size. I try to consider as many games as possible, and then I just weigh the later games heavier. So that's kind of what I'm looking for a tier list like this. I've got nothing else for the introduction for this one, so let's get right into it. We'll start out with Duro from Gen G. I think that Duro's had a really interesting year. He started out coming in with very low expectations. He played for a middle of the pack LCK team. He was a middle of the pack LCK support. I think in split 1, he played like a middle of the pack LCK support. I thought he was definitely the worst player on the team. He was serviceable, but still not great. Gen G did end up finishing second in that first split, and I do think that part of that was that Duro was just getting outclassed by the other top tier supports. Moving into split 2, I thought that he improved a lot. My personal opinion from watching split 2 was that I didn't think that he was an elite player yet, but I thought that he was very, very good and definitely was earning his spot on that Gen G super team. Then I thought at MSI he had some really nice games. So, for example, I thought that the Blitzcrank game that he played against AL was fantastic. And on that note, this guy, he's played a couple of Blitzcrank games in Split 3 and Split 3 playoffs, and it feels like he does God's work every single time he locks in Blitzcrank. I'm pretty much down to say that I think he's the best Blitzcrank in the world right now. And speaking of which, I also think that come Split 3 and Split 3 playoffs, he's taken another leap. He has improved yet again. And at this point, I would consider him to be an elite support. I do think that you can throw him in for an argument for best support in the world if you wanted to. I'm going to hold my tongue on that a little bit. I don't know if I think that Duro is the best support in the world. I think that he does benefit a lot from being in Gen G's system. He has 4 amazing players alongside of him who can cover up for some of his weaknesses. But overall, I think that Duro is super elite. He's got some champions that he's fantastic on. He can play pretty much like every engaged champion he wants to. He's got a lot of flexibility with other picks as well. I would say that Duro's ceiling at this tournament, some of the games that he was playing in Split 3 playoffs and Split 3 were fantastic. I thought that for all of the games that Gen G lost in Split 3 playoffs, it was not on Duro. I thought that it was either Canyon or Chovy underperforming for the most part. So I think ceiling, I'm down to put Duro in S. Floor, so this is interesting. Do I think that there's a chance that he could regress to just being a good support? Or do I think that he'll have what it takes to kind of play at an elite level no matter what? I don't know if I want to trust him just yet. I feel like he's very new playing internationally. He did have a good MSI showing, so maybe I should be giving him benefit of the doubt and putting him A. But I do feel like in split 1 and split 2, I definitely would have leaned more towards putting him in B. So the question is just, do I really want to value just split 3 and split 3 playoffs for deciding what his floor is going to be? I think I would feel better about it if I said that his floor was like high B. If somebody wanted to say that his floor was low A, then sure. But when I think about other players who I put as an A tier floor, like I don't think that Duro has the floor that Keen has. Like that doesn't really sound realistic to me. So I'm gonna put Duro's floor in high B. Maybe there's a chance that when the moment finally comes, he just won't have the type of experience and grit that players like Delight would have, for example, or maybe even a player like On, even though On is a little bit of a griefer. I'm gonna say overall, Duro, it's weird. I feel weird about putting him into S tier, but I do think that he deserves it. I think that the way that he's played, the way that he's improved, and the way that he has played for this most recent stretch of games, I think he deserves being in S tier. So I'm down to put him in there. If somebody wants to disagree and put him in A, I think that's fine. I'm going to put him in like bottom of S territory. Okay, next up we have Delight. I think that Delight is a very interesting player heading into this tournament. When Delight is at his best, he is, in my opinion, the best engager in the world. I think that when it comes to playing champions like Rel and Rakan and going in and making stuff happen and just straight up 5v5 engaging to start the fight, I think that nobody does it better than Delight when he's on fire. I do think that Delight can have very minimal champion pool issues. I don't expect it to be a problem, but I mean, he can't pilot range supports in the same way that, you know, somebody like Carrier can. I mean, like nobody can pilot range supports the way that Carrier can, but it is something that I want to point out when it comes to these supports that I'm going to have at the top of the tier list. I think that in terms of ceiling, Delight's ceiling is that at any given moment, he could be the best in the world. His ceiling, I think, is definitely above Duro. That said, when we get to floor, I mean, I'm also going to have I guess I'll have to put Delight's floor lower than Duro, because what I was going to say was that I feel like Delight has not been the most consistent this split. I think that everybody on HLE, apart from Viper, has had random stretches of time where they're not very consistent. There have been games where Delight's engages just aren't really working, and they can't really get anything going in the team fighting department. So I could see a world where Delight comes in and he's struggling to find good engages, and then if his main tool that makes him elite is struggling, then maybe he will only end up being a good support, and that's it. Overall, I'm usually, under most circumstances, I would just put Delight in S tier and not think about it. But there is a part of me that is considering dropping him to high A. I'm not convinced that he has been as consistent as I want him to be to put him in S. I think you could put him in S. I might end up putting him in S. I just have to decide what feels better to me. Do I feel better putting him in high A or low S? I mean, I have to think about... I mean, I do think... You know what? I'm going to put Delight in low S, and I think that it will make more sense as I fill out the rest of the tier list. But I do want to point out that I would have Duro and Delight both on the lower side of S. They're neither of them are like solidly... I'm 100% confident that they're S tier supports. Okay, Peter. Peter is... I mean, okay. Peter is not a great player. He's a fine player. He is good. He is good enough to play at an LCK level acceptable enough that he's not getting relegated or benched from the league. I think that in terms of LCK supports, he's probably floating somewhere around the, I don't know, 6th, 7th place range. I don't think that he does anything exceptionally. He can play the engaged champions at a suitable level, and I don't think he has much else in his champion pool. For his ceiling, I can't see his ceiling being any higher than B. I don't think that we see a world where Peter steps it up and becomes an engaged god and also randomly learns how to pilot karma or something. I'm not seeing that kind of world for Peter. I think he's just going to come in. He's going to be a support who can do his job and hopefully not be a liability to the team. I think that his floor is that he is a liability for the team, and he ends up being one of the players on KT who end up making it so that way KT don't qualify out of Swiss. So that would be where I would put Peter, is that B, C tier range. On the overall tier list, I'm going to put him in B. I think he is fine. I think that he is not special. Next up, we've got Keria. In my opinion, Keria has been the best support in the world over the course of the entire year. I think that there were multiple stretches of time where Keria was the best support in the world. I even think there was a small period of time where you could make an argument that Keria was the best player in the world, better than Chovy. And that period of time would have been MSI. For me personally, I had Keria as my MSI MVP, even though T1 didn't end up winning MSI. When I tallied all of the scores that I gave players, it ended up that Keria had the highest average. He played a great series, basically every single series. There were some games where he was completely 1v9. In Summer Split specifically, he has become super threatening. Basically, he can, if he locks in Poppy or Bard, that's just a free T1 win, basically. I know that there are some teams who beat Keria on Poppy, but for the most part, if Keria locks in Poppy, I feel very scared for the enemy team, regardless of who they are. And that's really just kind of how I feel about Keria as a whole. I feel like he has a set of champions that are his picks, and if he's playing them, then they're super scary, and you cannot let him get those picks. I think that the only times that T1 struggles are when teams were willing to go out of their way to shift their entire draft priority around making sure that Keria doesn't get his champions. And when you have a player who has that much influence over the draft and can still be pretty solid on pretty much any other champion, like you've got a crazy player on your team. I still hold the opinion that I think that Keria's engaged champions are not as good as a player like Delight. I don't think that Keria can engage on the same level as Delight can. That said, in the past, I would have said that I think that Keria's engaged champion pool on average is maybe like B tier. Nowadays, I would say he's definitely improved. I think that his engaged pool is A tier, and I think he's got a couple of champions, like Rakan, for example, that I absolutely trust. So if he locks that in, I'm completely fine with that. I would say, for me, his ceiling, top of S, no doubt in my mind. I think that when Keria is playing at his best, he is by far the best support in the world. He is a meta-defining player who is dictating what everybody else is doing and all of the champions that are strong and weak. I think that his floor would be if teams basically permanently ban out his champions every single game and he gets forced into playing something like Nautilus or Leona practically every game. If we see ourselves in that world, then again, like I mentioned, I think that Keria is roughly an A tier engager at this point in his career. So I would put his floor in A tier. And then overall, I would have Keria as the number one support. And in my eyes, I think that Keria is the number one support by a pretty large margin. Next up, we've got Kaiwing. Kaiwing is a player who a lot of CFO fans and a lot of LCP viewers have a very high opinion of. I personally do not have a high opinion of Kaiwing. There was actually, I ended up making, after LCP regular season ended, I made an LCP tier list for all of the roles. And on every single role, I had, well, okay, so for top lane, I had Kiaya first and then Driver second. But for jungle, mid, and bot, I had the CFO players in first. And then for the support list, at the end of regular season, I put Kaiwing in fifth. And there were a lot of people who were definitely not very happy with me about that. But basically, I just think that Kaiwing has a lot of issues that do not translate well when you play against better teams. So the first issue for Kaiwing, and probably the biggest issue, is his lack of champion pool. So Kaiwing can only play engaged champions, and it's not the type of only can play engage that Delight has, where Delight's best champions are engaged and then he can still pilot everything else reasonably. Kaiwing, his best champions are engaged, but he can't play anything else. He added Nico to his champion pool, but Nico, in my opinion, is more of an engaged champion anyway. Like, the best Nico players can stomp lane with her and then just be like an engaged bot later. Kaiwing, I've never been super impressed with his Nico lane phase, but he does find good engages with the champion later, so, you know, props to him for adding the Nico to his pool. But I do think that for the most part, even when he's getting his engaged champions, he's still not an elite support. I feel like he makes a lot of mistakes that mid-tier supports tend to make, that mid-tier tank supports tend to make. He walks in a lot for vision when there are timers that you can't walk in and he'll end up dying. So sometimes like he won't pay attention to which lanes have prio and he'll just walk in for a deep ward, he'll get caught out and then die. That's something that happens in multiple games. Another thing that Kaiwing does is that he over engages in fights. So if he sees the angle to get a 2-man knockup or a 3-man knockup, or if he sees the angle to hit a carry with a hook, he's just going to go for it. It doesn't matter whether his team is ready for it. It doesn't matter whether the enemy team was baiting him into it. He'll just go for it, and a lot of the times it's a bad play, and he ends up dying, or the fight ends up going poorly. He also over-indexes into flanks, I think. There are some games where Kaiwing will go for a flank and it's a game-winning flank and it's really cool. But I feel like he tries too hard to find flanks. There are a lot of team fights and a lot of objective situations where I feel like it would be a lot better for CFO if Kaiwing was just grouped up with the team and was helping his team face check bushes and get position and get onto the objective. But instead he'll go off into Narnia and look for a crazy flank angle, and some of the times it works, and then the other half of the time he's just inting. So that is something that I wish he did a little bit less, even though sometimes it can win them games. I do wish he would do it less. When it comes to ranged champions, his Bard is, I mean, I guess I wouldn't call his Bard awful, but I don't think his Bard is good. And he doesn't have anything else in his pool. I was never, like, historically, I've never been impressed by his Lulu or his Karma or anything like that. So I think that Kaiwing will be a really big liability for this team in Fearless. I think that he will die a lot against better teams. He did not die a lot domestically, but I think he will die a lot against better teams. At MSI, I thought that Kaiwing was the biggest limiting factor for this team and the main reason why they weren't able to close out the series against T1. Especially like in game 1 against T1, it was Kaiwing who initiated the game-losing throw on the Otacon. He was kind of, his team was thinking about hitting the Otacon, and then he was playing Leona, and he went for an insane flank with no information, and he just ended up getting caught out, and he died, and then the rest of the team tried to save him, and they all died too. So, that's the type of thing that happens to Kaiwing a lot on an international stage. So I'm not very high on Kaiwing. I would say overall, like, to summarize, I think that when he's on his champions, when he's on engaged tanks, he is maybe a low B, high C tier support. If you get him off of those, if you put him on other stuff, he's like low C, high D tier support. The one thing that I will mention is that he's just randomly really good at Thresh for some reason. Like, I think that Thresh is a pretty terrible champion in the meta right now, but Kaiwing just locks it in all the time, and pretty much every time he locks it in, he wins, and he's like hitting every hook and whatever, so it's like, maybe he's just a Thresh god, who knows. I'm going to say that Kaiwing's ceiling at this tournament, I will put him at like a low B, and then for his floor, I'm going to put him at D. Overall, my personal opinion is that I view Kaiwing as a C tier support. I think that when you look at LCP supports, there are a lot of other supports who I would take over him. I think that he, at this point, I would say that I would probably take him over Woody just because I've not been impressed with Woody this split. But, I thought that Elio, who is also another support who I'm not very high on, I would have said that Elio played a better year than Kaiwing. Thought that Sulong has a lot more potential than Kaiwing. I think that Taki had a better split than Kaiwing. So there's a lot of supports who I would put about who I would want on my team before I would want Kaiwing on my team. And then the other thing to mention is that a lot of Kaiwing defenders like to say that Kaiwing is the main shot caller for the team. They're like, okay, you can say all you want about Kaiwing's negative traits and the fact that he dies a lot or whatever, but at the end of the day, he's doing all of the shot calling for the team, which means that he plays a really big role in the team. And my response to this is that I always say that one of CFO's biggest weaknesses as a team to me is that I feel like they are not a very smart team when it comes to objective setups. I don't like how they handle many of their objective setups. I feel like they fight a lot of fights that they should not be winning. They take a lot of fights completely unprepared. They seem very disorganized in a lot of their setups. And the main reason why they end up winning so many fights is because CFO are just a fantastic team fighting team. So they can walk into a situation that they should not win, and then they'll hands diff the opponent and win anyway. That's what they did a lot domestically. That's what they even did against some of the higher tier international competition. But overall, if you're telling me that Kaiwing is the shot caller for this team, I would say that I think that overall the shot calling for this team is pretty bad. I don't like a lot of the decisions that this team makes. In grand finals against Team Secret Wales, game 1, CFO ended up winning game 1, but in my opinion, every single fight that CFO took in that game was a bad fight. They ended up winning a Herald fight, they ended up winning another Dragon fight after that, but I thought those fights were bad fights, and that CFO just out microed Secret Wales in those fights. CFO just showed up, and they team fought better, they had better hands, and so they won. But every single time they would go into one of the fights, I was like, this is a bad fight for X reason. Like, for X factor, they should not take this fight, and then they would take the fight, and they would just win anyway. So, to me, if you want to say that Kaiwing is the shot caller for the team, I view that as Kaiwing is the one making these decisions that I don't like, so that just adds to the idea that I don't think that Kaiwing is a good fit on this team. Moving into the next support, we have Taki. Taki is a much more flexible support than Kaiwing. Taki does not have a lot of the random, super crazy game-winning plays that Kaiwing can have, but he does have a much bigger champion pool. He's a very solid player. I would say overall, I view Taki as somebody who is a much better foundation to build a team around than Kaiwing would be. Another thing Taki is going for him is that he's the only player on Secret Whales who has played at an international before. And when he showed up to internationals, I always thought that he looked really good. So if you want to consider past international tournaments, I think that Taki actually has that going for them. Over the course of the year, from the start of the year to the end of the year, I would say that I thought that Taki was the best performing support player across all three splits. Overall, I mean, I would say I think that Taki's ceiling is also B tier. I'm gonna put Taki's ceiling right above. Honestly, I can't talk. I'm gonna put Taki's ceiling above Peter. I think that Peter's champion pool is too limited to have a crazy high ceiling in the fearless draft format that we have, whereas this is the type of format that Taki can flourish in. So high B tier ceiling for Taki. Floor, I also think that Taki is a pretty consistent player. I would say that in most games, no matter what champion Taki is on, I trust him to play the game well, and I trust him not to run it down. I'm gonna put Taki's floor in high C. Overall, I'm gonna put Taki in B tier. I'm gonna put Taki above Peter. Finally, we've got Woody. Woody is a support who I've also never really been that high on. I personally think that in the LCP, support is their weakest role. I would say across the board, this region struggles the most with finding capable supports, at least at an international level. Woody, he's shown up to a couple of internationals. I've never been that impressed by him. I feel like he has some of the issues that Kaiwing has, like sometimes he'll overengage. An issue that Woody has that Kaiwing does not have is that sometimes Woody will just be completely invisible. There are games where it feels like Woody has no influence, where he's just completely disappearing and doing nothing. At the very least, Kaiwing will never do nothing. Like, Kaiwing will always make his influence known within the game, whether it's positive or negative. Sometimes Woody will just have no influence, and I think that can be a very bad thing. Woody has pretty solid mechanics. Like, he has a moment every now and then where I'm like, what the heck? Where did that come from? Where has that been all year? Like, he has moments like that makes me think that maybe his ceiling is higher. But for the most part, I view Woody as kind of just not a very reliable support, not a very active support. I think that one of his big advantages is that he's willing to pick everything. He can play pretty much any style you want. He can play disengage with a Braum or a Tahm Kench. He can play enchanters. He can play ranged champions. He can play engagers. He can do whatever you need him to do, which makes it easy for PSG to draft. He'll lock it in and he'll be mediocre on it. Whatever. Overall, I would say even despite the champion pool edge, I would say that Woody's ceiling is no higher than a C tier, and his floor is going to be above Kaiwing in D tier, but overall, I would say that Woody is a worse support than Kaiwing. I've coin flipped on this back and forth through the year, but I think in split 3, Kaiwing definitely played better than Woody did, so I'm going to give Kaiwing the edge here. I think that Kaiwing just has a higher upside, which is a big part of it, and yeah, I just think that Woody is overall just an uninspiring player. Moving into the LEC, Mickey is up next. Mickey, most of the time, in pretty much like every international in the past that Mickey has attended, in the past like half decade, he's been the best Western support by a mile pretty much. I think that maybe there were a couple of tournaments where you could argue that Hillisang was up there or Core JJ was up there, but usually it's just Mickey as the best support from the West. This time around, I think he's got some competition. We'll talk about it later, but overall, I'm going to have Mickey like pretty high up. I think that Mickey is the most creative support. Well, okay. I don't know if I would say that Mickey's the most creative support we have at this tournament. It's either him or Carrier, but Mickey is one of the most creative supports that we have at the tournament. When his team is losing or struggling and they need something crazy to happen to win the game, I feel like Mickey always comes up with some insane angles to get them back into the game. Something that Mickey does that like this is a strength that Kaiwing also has where if things are dire, Kaiwing will go for a crazy flank and will maybe try to wrestle control of the game. My problem with Kaiwing is that I feel like he goes for flanks when he doesn't need to. Mickey does not have that problem. If the team doesn't need him to flank, he's not going to flank. He's only going to flank if he feels like something's desperate or if he feels like he has a really good window to do something. So I don't really think that Mickey has issues there. Mickey also can be prone to running it down sometimes, but unlike some of the other players on this tier list, when Mickey runs it down, I always know exactly what he was going for, which I think is important. Like if I can at least understand what the support was trying to do, it means something to me because I feel like it means that they're thinking, means that they have some kind of direction. So I like that a lot about Mickey. He never has a stupid int where I'm completely questioning what was even going on in his brain. I think that Mickey's champion pool is also one of the best champion pools a support can have. He always seems to have multiple crazy picks that he can pull out at any given time that can get him an edge. He's always trying to think about what the next big thing is that will allow him to triumph over teams that are better than his team. So I think that these are the strengths that you would want in a support that is going to try to fight against the East. This year, I would say that Mickey has not been quite as good as he was in past years, but he is still very, very good. I'm going to put his ceiling in A tier, and I'm going to put his floor in B tier, behind Delight and Duro, but I'm going to put his floor in B tier. I think even if Fnatic struggle a lot, Mickey is not going to be one of the players who struggles, and he will be if anything, I think that Mickey will be, if Fnatic end up struggling, he's going to be probably the only player on the team who has any kind of life to them that would be creating any good plays whatsoever. So overall, Mickey, to me, is either high B or low A. I think I'm going to put him in high B. Like I said, I do think that it has been a slightly worse split from him than we've seen in prior years. Part of that is maybe just that Fnatic has been a disorganized team who has had varying levels of playoff success this year. But I'm going to put Mickey at the very top of B. If you wanted to slot in Mickey in low A, I would not have a problem with that. Next up, we've got Alvaro. Alvaro is an engage specialist. I think that he is the best Western engager that we have. So he's like the Western equivalent of Delight in that regard. When it comes to, just when you have some kind of face-off, when both teams are just staring at each other and they're jostling for position and somebody needs to pull the trigger to make the fight start, I think that Alvaro is one of the best in the world at doing that. A lot of his engages are fantastic. A lot of the times if MKOI is behind, it is Alvaro who is finding the good play that can drag them back into the game. So I think he's a great comebacker. I think that his engages for the most part are very consistent as well. He almost never makes a bad engage. I had issues in the past with his champion pool. I used to think of him as kind of like, hey, he can only play engaged champions. I think nowadays, I think he is acceptable on non-engagers. So still not a strong suit, but not a weak point either. I don't think that Alvaro has reached elite potential yet. I think he still has a little bit to go, especially in the laning department. It sometimes feels like Supa and Alvaro can lose lane against elite laners. So I think that Alvaro's laning definitely needs some work. But overall, I would say that he is going to be very solid most likely. I'm going to put, I feel maybe some MKOI fans won't like this, but I'm going to put Alvaro's ceiling at the top of B, and then I'm going to put his floor also in B. I think that he is going to be consistent. I've never really seen Alvaro play badly in a high pressure moment. I mean, like everybody on Mad Lions played badly last year at Worlds, but we can kind of just erase that from our memory, I think. Apart from that, I've never seen Alvaro play badly. I've never seen him be the weak link for his team. I have seen many moments where everybody on his team is playing badly except for him. So I view him as a very consistently good player. I'm going to put Alvaro right behind Mickey. I think these two players are very good supports. Next up, we got Labrov. Labrov is an interesting player because if you look at his split 1 and his split 2, he is not that good. He was having a lot of issues earlier in the year where he was not very active, not doing very much. I attributed that mostly to Skewmond. I thought that when Labrov was playing with Sheo on BDS, Sheo is a very proactive jungler. Sheo likes to make things happen early. When he was playing with Sheo, I thought that he looked really good. I think that Labrov's biggest strength is always that he is able to understand what his jungler wants to do, and he can play around his jungler well. Jungle support synergy is Labrov's specialty. So when Skewmond is not really doing anything, Labrov's not really doing anything either. And that was the story for G2 for the first 2 splits. So for those tournaments, Labrov, low B, high C, low C, something like that. That's about the best that you can get from him. This tournament coming in, I think that in Split 3 and in Split 3 playoffs, G2's jungle support synergy has been way, way better. They feel like a way more active duo now. So the question is really like, do I want to move Labrov up that high? Do I really think... I mean, I don't think that Labrov has an insane ceiling. I think that Labrov is a solid player. He has his strengths. He has a good champion pool. He's pretty good at engaging, pretty good at vision, pretty good at flanking, blah, 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 all that stuff. I would say that his ceiling is not necessarily the highest. I'm going to put his ceiling like maybe here. And then for his floor, I mean, like we've seen cases in the past where Labrov can be not so great. Like there's a reason why when Labrov first got signed to G2, a lot of people were not excited about the signing. I definitely think that there's a world where Labrov can come in and be an underwhelming support. Overall, I'm going to put Labrov down here, also in B tier. Looking at this, I feel like maybe I want to move Mickey up to A tier. I'll decide on this later. I think that you could really order these supports in basically any order you want. It just depends on what you think is most important, because like when push came to shove, Labrov was able to play really well when G2 was beating MKOI. So if you want to use that, then you could put Labrov up in front. If you want to say like, okay, Mickey's got the X factor, he's got the champion pool, the creativity, I want to put him in front, then sure. If you say Alvaro has the great engages and he is an international riser for the most part, I want to put him in front, like you can do that too. I think you could really put these supports in any order. The only thing I'm going to question is maybe as we get later into the tier list, I'll decide if I want to move Mickey up to A or not. We'll see how many people I end up with in A tier. On has had a very interesting year. So in the past, I always viewed On as being a super excellent player whose ceiling is best support in the world, super flexible, lots of champions he can play, very creative. This year, he's had some really, really bad individual games. This year, more so than any past year, I feel like sometimes he's just inting. I think that sometimes he still has really good games, but he has been dying a lot more than he used to be dying on timers that he should not be dying on. And I have not really enjoyed watching it. I think that when On is playing at his best, he can still be a very good support. I'm still going to put his ceiling in S tier. I think that he had stretches of time in the LPL, especially like in playoffs and stuff, where he was playing really well. You know, like something I pointed out with Elk is that Elk and On, the later you get into Fearless, the more scary they become. Sometimes On will just randomly lock in Elise and then destroy you. Sometimes it'll just happen, you know? So I think that when On is playing at his best, he can still be a top of the table, very, very strong support. But in the past, I might have had On in, you know, A tier floor, B tier floor. I'm going to put On in C tier floor, actually. I think that we saw On, I mean, I don't know how badly I think he can play. I'm going to put him at the top of C tier. At MSI, On did not play well at all. I think that he was worse than Kyle. He was worse than Busio. I really think that On was struggling. I even thought that he was worse than Alvaro in the series against MKOI. So, you know, I think that if he shows up at Worlds the same way he did at MSI, where he's just dying all over the place and not really doing anything productive in the games, then yes, he will be a C tier support. I think that there is a world where, I think his range is that big. I think there's a world where he could be really good and a world where he could regress back to how he looked earlier this year and then just be a detriment to the team. I'm going to say overall, On... I think that for me, the deciding factor is going to be that I have been impressed with him at internationals in the past. I'm going to put On in A tier. Next up, we have Kyle. Kyle has had a pretty interesting year as well. I think that in Split 2 and Split 2 playoffs, there was a good argument that he was one of the best, if not the best supports in the world. When he was playing at his best, he could play like 15, 16 different champions, all at an elite level. He was styling on people. He had some super crazy engages. Just looked really, really good. Then he went to MSI. He was fine. He did fine at MSI. In Split 3, he has not been good. He has been making a lot of mistakes. His engages aren't working. It feels like a lot of the players on AL have just been struggling more. Like I feel like Shanks has been struggling more, Kyle's been struggling more, Hope's been struggling a little bit, but partly just because Kyle is struggling. So for me, I think Kyle, I would be surprised if he could play at this tournament the way that he played in Split 2. I would be shocked. I'm going to put Kyle's ceiling in A. I'm going to put his ceiling behind Mickey. For his floor, I mean, like, I think that he is overall still pretty solid for the most part, I would say. He's definitely had his moments where he's not elite, but I feel like at this tournament he will at least be good. He'll at least be serviceable. I'm going to put his floor here in B. I'm going to put his floor there. Overall, I think, you know, originally when I was planning out this tier list in my head, I was going to put Kyle like here. But the more that I think about it, the more that I actually think that Kyle has had more of a B tier split, maybe even like slightly lower than like a lower tier B tier split. So if I'm saying that like I'm really valuing Split 3 and Split 3 playoffs, where I thought that Kyle was kind of mediocre, and then I care about Split 2 but not as much, and then in Split 2 I thought he was elite, I think that we weigh that, and overall that means I think he's going to be good but not great. I'm going to put Kyle in B. feel like there is a chance that I would want to move Mickey above Kyle, but overall, I do think that Mickey's going to struggle a little bit just because of the team that he's on. I don't think Fnatic will do very well at the tournament. Hong is an interesting player. We don't really have that much to go off of for him because he had a short stint on Weibo where he was terrible. The fit was terrible on the team. He ended up getting benched for a rookie. That's how bad it was in Split 2. Then in Split 3, Top Esports picked him up. They were so unsure about him that they also promoted their academy support to the main roster to use as a substitute, just in case Hong was terrible. Actually turned out that Hong was pretty good. He ended up being arguably the best support in the league for multiple portions of time. But again, the sample size is really low, so we don't know. In past years, I've been very impressed with Hong on and off. When he was on LNG, I thought that he had some stretches of time where he was really good. He also had some stretches of time where it felt like he regressed into just being good and not much better than that. So heading into Worlds, not really sure. I think that Hong is a super aggressive support compared to some of these other players here. It feels like he's always out for blood. He's always looking for some kind of play that he can make, which is funny because I think that he's kind of like, he's like the perfect fit for top esports, but also the worst fit ever for top esports because he likes to play as aggressively as top esports like to play because they're a very early game centric team. They have a lot of good coordinated plans early, so they like to do stuff and get their leads like that. So Hong is very good for that. But at the same time, Top Esports is a team who can overplay their hand and throw a lot of games. And Hong is definitely somebody who can contribute to that kind of stuff too. I would say that for me, Hong's ceiling, I will put at top of A. I don't know if I think that he has the same type of ceiling that On has. Hong definitely had a better split than On did, in my opinion. If we're going from start of Split 3 to end of Split 3 playoffs, I would have said that I preferred Hong's play to On's play, but I don't think that Hong has it in him to produce the type of ceiling that On can if they're both playing at their best. For his floor, I mean, I do think he has a little bit of an I do think he has a little bit of an inter, but he's definitely not the biggest inter on his team. Like the biggest inter on his team is Jackie Love for sure, and then there's some other stuff happening with that team. Like I think that Cream can be a little bit of a choker sometimes. So Hong, he's been somewhat consistent at Worlds. I will say that his floor will go like B. We'll go near the bottom of B. Overall, I'm feeling A tier for Hong. I am going to put Hong above On. I do really want to honor the fact that I thought that Hong was the better support in Split 3, but I am not putting Hong in S tier. I don't think that he is that good. Next up, we've got Mako. Mako is an interesting player to do because for me, some of it is speculation in the same way that you can speculate that Faker has intangibles. Like, for example, we saw whenever Faker can't play for some reason, whether he's like injured or sick or something, if he can't play, then the rest of the team around him kind of collapses because he just has a presence on the team that makes everybody feel more comfortable, makes everybody around him play better, right? And that is an intangible. We don't know that for sure, but it's something that we can that's kind of implied based on how T1 has played over the course of the years. Is that Faker just raises the team's ceiling just by being there. I think that Mako is also a player like that who has some intangibles that I value that I have no definitive proof for. For me, the main one that I like to mention is that every single team that Mako has ever joined has drastically had their macro improved. And I think that this year has been no different. IG had much better macro than I was expecting them to have. I think that most of the time when IG is inting or doing something stupid, it's because a player is making some kind of mechanical mistake or they're making an individual 1v1 decision that's not so great. So like maybe sometimes the Shy will get hand stiffed top lane and get solo killed, or maybe Wei will go for a play that looks good on paper and then he'll screw it up and then it ends up being terrible. But I think that for the most part, when it comes to map movements, rotations, objective setups, I think that IG is one of the better teams in the LPL for it. And me personally, I attribute a lot of that to Mako. So I think that Mako is a huge floor raiser for any team he joins. That said, I think that Mako has not been amazing individually this year, I would say. I think that there are some times where he can over-engage and die. He definitely has his fair share of individual ints. I would put his ceiling in A tier. I would say that Mako has like an A tier ceiling this year. I'll put his ceiling below Kyle just because I think that Kyle is a little bit of a more flexible player. However, for Mako's floor, I think that Mako, again, he's a floor raiser for his team. I think that he is a very smart player. So I think that his floor is also higher. I'm going to put his floor like here. Overall, I would say that I would expect Mako to show up and be like a high B tier support. That's kind of how I view him. Is high B, potential to push into low A. We're not going to see him play much better than that. We're not going to see him play much worse than this. So that's where I'm going to put Mako. Next up, Busio. Busio has had an extremely impressive year to me. I have been super happy with what I've been seeing from him. Feel like he has taken a big step forward from 2024. When it comes to these young NA and EU talents, I'm always kind of waiting for them to take that step forward to become an elite player. A lot of times we'll see players who have a lot of potential and become pretty good, but they never take that last step forward where they can be competing with or be better than some of their Eastern counterparts. I think that Busio this year has taken that step forward. I think that he is a crazy talent. Something that Busio has that nobody else on in the support pool other than Keria has is that I think that Busio has a truly elite ranged support champion pool. So when Busio is playing something like Nico, Bard, Karma, Renato, when he's playing a champion like that, I think he is truly an elite player. There are other players on this tier list who I think are pretty good at range supports. Like I think that Kyle is pretty good at range supports, but I wouldn't say that Kyle's range support pool is elite in the same way that Busio's range support pool is elite. When it comes to engages, I don't think that Busio is special, but I think that he is pretty good. So I would say that like a player like Alvaro can have better engages than Busio, but also Busio's engages are pretty solid. I think that Busio is definitely the best support coming out of the West this year. For ceiling, I'm going to put Busio's ceiling at top of A tier. I don't think that he has an S tier ceiling. There are probably some people who do think that he has an S tier ceiling. I think that, you know, like I mentioned earlier, I think his ranged support pool does have an S tier ceiling. The problem is that there's only so many ranged supports. I think that he is going to get forced into playing something like, you know, like an Alistar or a Rakan, something like this, a Braum, you know, and I think that he is not a top tier support on those picks. So I'm going to say that his ceiling is top of A. For his floor, I have been very impressed with how Busio's floor has looked this entire year. He has not had a weak stretch all year. Thought that he was great at MSI. He was great in Split 3 playoffs. I would be shocked if he ends up showing any kind of down performance at all. I think he has the champion pool to back it up. Like one of the reasons why I have Keria in A tier for floor is because I feel like no matter what you do, Keria is always going to have a very strong skill set to fall back on. I think that Busio is very much the same way. Like really, if I'm saying this, I really just think that Busio is kind of like the Western Keria. He's like Keria, but not as good. I would put Busio's floor either in low A or high C. High B, low A or high B. Do I think that his floor is higher than Duro's? Do I think that Busio at his worst is better than Duro at his worst? I might be delusional. I'm gonna say yes. I think that Busio at his worst is better than Duro at his worst. I'm down for that. I think that Busio really has taken that step to becoming an elite consistent talent. I'm not going to put him in A just because I don't think that I don't think he's at Keria levels of floor. But overall, I'm putting Busio here in fourth. You know, people can wrestle with the decision if they want. Maybe somebody would want Busio here, or maybe they would want, you know, Mickey here, or maybe they would even want something like this, right? But me personally, I think that Busio is super talented. I'm going to have him at top of A. I think he has been FlyQuest's second best player all year. Trimby is a pretty good support for LTA South standards. People will remember Trimby from his time in EU with Rogue. He had stretches of time where he was the best support in the West when he was on Rogue, where he was kind of up there competing with Mickey and stuff for who the best support in the West was. During that time, his biggest strength was always his champion pool. He was always thinking about what type of creative picks he could go to get an edge over other people, and then he would have the mechanics to back it up. So he would be able to just like pick some random bullshit and win lane and looked really good while doing it. Ever since he moved to CBLOL, I think his mechanics have declined a bit, or at CBLOL. Ever since he moved to LTA South, I think his mechanics have declined a bit. There was, when I was watching him domestically and in cross-conference playoffs, there were some moments where he would make an uncharacteristically low hands play that I was not expecting to see from somebody like Trimby. Something he does still have is that I still view him as a very smart player. I think some of the plays that he was making were high-level plays, especially he had a Nico game in cross-conference that I thought was really good. So I think that Trimby, he has upside still. He's still willing to pick a lot of champions that other supports might not be willing to pick. So like if he sees a really good Milio angle, he'll lock in Milio. If he sees a really good Lulu angle, he'll lock in Lulu. He doesn't care if champions are perceived as strong or weak. If he thinks that it's a good spot for them, he's willing to pick them. And I think that that is a good strength for any player to have, really. But I just don't think that Trimby's mechanics are what they once were. So I might be putting Trimby a little bit lower than LEC watchers might be expecting. But I do think that Trimby has definitely fallen off a bit. So I would put his ceiling in B. I think that his ceiling is right around here. No, I think the ceiling is a little bit high. I would put his ceiling behind Kaiwing, actually. I'll put his ceiling here. And then I will put his floor. I do really think that there is a chance that Trimby gets completely outclassed by every support in the field, that his mechanics just fail him and none of the plays that he wants to go for work out and he's losing lane to pretty much everybody. I do think there's a chance that happens. I'm going to put his floor at top of D. Overall, I'm going to slot Trimby into the C tier for supports. Where do I want to put him within this tier? I'll give Kaiwing the edge, but I'll put Trimby above Woody. Then finally, we've got Ayla. So Ayla is a player who in the past I would have said is the worst support at the tournament. And honestly, I probably still think he's the worst support in the tournament, but I think he's the worst support in the tournament by a lower gap. I think he has improved a little bit. Definitely inting less this year than he did last year for sure. So I don't think that Ayla is special. I have not seen a single play from Ayla all year where I went, wow, that was a really good play. I feel like Ayla at his best, he is a fine support who is contributing to his team's wins. And then at his worst, he can int a little bit. I will put his ceiling right next to Woody because at least for me, Woody does have some moments where I think that mechanically he might have something going on. Ayla, not so much for me. For Ayla's floor, I'm going to go D tier floor. I think that in the past, I would have put him here, dead last in floor. This year, I think he has improved to become a little bit more consistent. I'm going to put his floor actually at the top of D. Overall, I do think that Ayla will be the worst support coming into this tournament, but in past years, I would have had him in D tier. This year, I'm going to put him at bottom of C tier, so I think that he has leveled up. Something that people might notice if they've been watching all of my tier lists is that the teams are much higher than they usually are. In past years, I had a lot more players in D tier, and I even had some players in F tier. Like off the top of my head, I remember I put Sparta from the VCS in F tier. There were times when I had Emo in F tier. There were times when I would have a player like I'm trying to think of. I think there was a year where I might have had like Harp in F tier or something. Like there are times when I have players in F tier. There are times like usually I have much more players in D tier. The difference this year is that all of the regions have gotten stronger because they've merged. So LCP, they basically created a bunch of PCS VCS super teams and we're going at it there. So same thing with the LTA, they merged with CBLOL and LLA. So a lot of the lower tier teams that would normally be at a tournament like this and a lot of the lower tier players that would normally be at a tournament like this are not at this tournament. We just have a stronger pool of players. So on average, they will be a higher seed. That's why we're seeing the worst players be C tier or like barely D tier, and we're not seeing any F tier players. I do think that this will be a very high level, at least in terms of floor. I think that the worst teams at this Worlds are going to be much better than the worst teams at any of the past few years of Worlds that we've had. So this is my support list. Let me take another look. Keria, Duro, Delight. We have a little bit of an LCK sweep here. I think that this is true. I do view the LCK supports as being better than the LPL supports right now. Next up, we got Busio, Hong, On, Mako, Kyle, Mickey, Alvaro, Lebrov. I wonder if there's something I can do to separate this LEC chunk. I do think that the LEC supports are all at relatively similar levels, and then they just have different strengths. Do I think that any of them will be better than Kyle at this tournament? Kyle was not good in Split 3. I could see it. Maybe I'll move Mickey above Kyle. I think I feel a little bit better about moving Mickey above Kyle. So Mickey, Kyle, Alvaro, Lebrov, Taki, Peter, Kaiwing, Trimby, Woody, Ayla. Okay. Ceiling list. I feel like having Duro in S tier ceiling is weird, but like I think it is true. Like he's had some insane games, and he definitely has his champions that he's insane on. So feels weird. I'm gonna keep him there. Ceiling. Sure, and then floor. I think this is fine. I think that Floor is fine. Okay, so I think that will do it for my support tier list. You know what? I'm gonna be honest. I was actually expecting to put some of these supports lower, but I'm pretty happy with how this looks, I think. Next up after this, since we've finished all of the player rankings, the next video I'll be doing is my team rankings video, but I will be pairing the team rankings with my pick'ems. So a lot of people have been asking to see my pick'ems. They'll be grouped in with the team rankings video, so that'll be a thing. And then after that, if I have time, I'm still thinking that I might want to do a draft video where I go over patches 25.18 to 25.20, and then I'll go over what champions I think might be strong at the tournament, what I think will be weaker, stuff like that. Similar to the video that I did for MSI, so look out for that. That might happen, it might not. Yeah, that's about it for this one. Patreon shoutouts. Check out the Patreon link in the description if you want to support me more while I'm making these videos. We have a lot of bonus content up on the Patreon. We have a bunch of video scripts, so anytime I write a script for a video, I always put the script up as soon as I finish it on there. So you might see a script there weeks before the video gets posted. It's a little bit of a sneak peek for the video. Anytime I do a Poro drawing, I always record the session and then I post the Poro drawing onto there unedited. Same thing on the same lines of the Poro drawings. You can see on the screen there are some custom Poro commissions. If you join the Patreon at the $10 tier, I will draw you a custom Poro, and as long as you stay subscribed, the Poro will show up on all of my video outros. I also have a rewatch of the Worlds 2022 Grand Final between DRX and T1. I went back and I rewatched that. That video is like 5 hours long. That's up on Patreon. That'll turn into a YouTube video eventually after the World Championships is over. Until then, that's there as a sneak peek as well. If any of that interests you, then I would be happy to have the support. That's all from me for this one. I'll see you all for the next video. Bye.